Hey everyone, I'm Brian Parks, the CEO of Synapse Software, and in today's video, I want to talk about users and security groups in Slingshot. So in the past couple videos, we've done a first look at Slingshot, some of the things that you can do with it. Then we dove down kind of underneath the surface and talked about conceptually how Slingshot works. And then we've started showing some of the UI elements that you can build in Slingshot and how to configure some of them. Now, in the next several videos, we're going to start kind of at the bottom and work our way up, kind of building up what Slingshot is, what you can configure within the tool, and how that can be useful to you and your organization. So if you haven't seen the video where I go through kind of a high-level architecture of the system, go ahead and take a look at that. I'll leave that linked in the description below. In fact, I'll leave all those videos linked in the description below. There is a playlist that has all of them, and will continue to have all of them as I add more. So stay tuned for that, and keep that in your bookmarks. So right now, we've talked about some of these presentation level elements, but in today's video, we're going to go down into security groups and users, and then in the next video, we'll actually talk about collections and schemas, and then we'll just kind of work our way up from there. So let's get started with the demo. So here I have my Slingshot instance. It's the same one I've been using for all of these videos. I'm also using it for development, so occasionally you might see some things that are currently in development that aren't in the version that you can download right now. But this is the same system that I've been using. There's no magic behind the scenes. Everything is exactly what you've seen on video. So there's nothing secret that magically makes things work. Everything works exactly as you're seeing it. So for this video, I'm going to go down to these icons here: Manage Users and Manage Security Groups. To start with, let's just go to Manage Users. Now, I did start with kind of a sample configuration that you can actually start with when you install Slingshot. You can actually start with a predefined set of collections and security settings, as well as some other configuration. And in this case, I used the CRM sample. So I have some people, you can see I'm kind of a bit of a fan of The Office. So we have Dwight and Jim that do different roles. We have another one, Joe. And then myself, I created a user for myself. And there's an administrative user. Now, it's important to have multiple users within the system, because then you can give them different roles, or in this case, security groups. We call them security groups, basically giving them different permissions. So if marketing needs access to one set of permissions and the sales staff needs access to a different set of permissions, or if you're in the IT realm, a technician needs access to one area of the system, management needs access to another aspect of the system, and so on. And this is done through security groups. I didn't spend too much time on users because users are pretty straightforward. They require a username, you can set a password, and the other important field is the security group that they're a member of. So here you can see I've defined a few: admin, marketing, salespeople, and sales managers. Now the admin group is important. There's nothing special about the admin security group. It doesn't have a specific ID, it doesn't need to have a specific name, but the important thing here is that you'll notice that, as the description spells out, this is the admin security group that should have rights to everything. And the important part there is, notice that if my list of collections down the left-hand side here, nothing is checked, which means that nothing is specifically set in this security group, but at the very bottom there's this row that's called default. Basically what that is this is the permissions that this security has if there aren't permissions specifically for an individual collection. So default is checked, obviously, and every single permission is allowed. And that's important for a security group, right? There are also some system rights, which aren't permissions on particular collections, but they're more system level functionality. So the ability to list collections, which is important for this screen here, the ability to add collections. That means that as a member of the admin security group, I can manage collections and click the add button there. I can delete collections. I can modify system settings down at this icon here. I can check database integrity. That's not a feature that's enabled through the UI, but we'll get to that in future videos. And I can export the system, which is also available through the settings. It's just a button that exports a kind of a compressed version of the entire system. And we continue to add options to this system rights as functionality gets added to the system. Now, if we talk about collection permissions, if you're familiar with how REST, representational state transfer, works, some of this might make sense to you. And because that's kind of technical, these names will probably change in a future version. But in the interest of full disclosure, I'll explain what each of these mean here. So, list basically means that having that permission gives you the ability to get a list of records in that particular collection. So this is a get many sort of situation. Get is the ability to get a particular record. Post is the ability to create a record. Put is the ability to update a record. Technically, there is a way that you can create a new record using put, but in general, through Slingshot, that means update a record. And then delete is obviously delete. Now, get schema and put schema are basically how you define the structure of records within a collection. Get schema is necessary for the UI to function. So this, for most security groups, get schema should be enabled for any collection that any other permissions are enabled for. Put schema is the ability to change the structure. So this is more intended for admins, right? Most other people within the system, most other security groups shouldn't have the ability to update the schema of a particular collection. And notice that the system collections are included in this list. It's not just user-defined collections. The system collections are these ones that start with a $sign. These are internal, but by enabling and disabling permissions on these, you can enable and disable certain functionality within the system. So for instance, service catalogs. If put or post is enabled for a particular security group, that means that members of that security group can create new service catalogs or update the configuration of existing service catalogs. If they don't have that permission, that means they can't. If they have list and get, that means they can see the list of service catalogs, they can get the service catalog, and obviously they would need get schema for service catalogs as well. That means that they would be able to view the service catalog, use the service catalog, and that sort of thing. So if we look at a more interesting security group, obviously admin is pretty important. It's important to have a group in the system, a security group in the system that has all permissions allowed. Otherwise, you might not be able to do everything in the system. That's kind of a problem. But it doesn't make for a very interesting discussion here. So let's go back to security groups and let's go to, let's say, sales managers. So you'll notice I gave sales managers the ability to list and get actions. They don't have the ability to create or update actions, but they could get actions, which means they can execute them as well. Boards, because obviously we want people to be able to use those boards. And there might be a specific situation here, or possibly on another security group, there is a way, if you drill into these drop-down menus, you have a couple options. So allowed, denied, those are pretty straightforward. Either yes, you have that permission, or no, you don't have that permission. Default is whatever the higher level permission is. So in this case, if I were to set default, it would basically default to whatever was set here in the default row down here. Obviously, this isn't enabled, so the default is actually denied for everything. Default is deny. If you don't specify the addition of a permission, that security group does not have that permission. And then custom, let's drill into that. This actually allows you to set a filter or an expression for that specific thing. So let's say, and this is accounts, right? So let's say and to be honest, I don't remember the exact schema of accounts. So let's say owned by equals, I believe it's current user ID. That needs to be an I. And you know, I should really remember how to use my own system. I don't remember exactly what this looks like, but I think it's that. Basically, is this account owned by the currently logged in user? And this would allow, I think this is post. For this particular example, it doesn't really make sense because if I'm creating a new one, it would probably be owned by me anyway. But this is as an example. You can specify an expression, and we'll go into detail about expressions later on down the road and exactly how to construct them and what they look like. So if you remember, I'll cancel that. If I click that again, the default filter is true. So true is a valid expression. And basically, that's the same as saying allowed. So there are 4 different permissions. There's allowed, denied, default, which again just looks to the next level up, either the default row or deny, which is the default for everything. Or you can customize the permission, which allows you to enable that permission for a specific subset of records. So either owned by, created by, owned by a team, that sort of thing. You can do some pretty fancy stuff with that. And expressions do allow a fair degree of complexity and sophistication. So that's why they definitely deserve their own video. And that'll probably be a pretty long one, so keep an eye out for that one. But other than that, this is basically just a matrix. So you have collections down the left side, permissions across the top, and you enable or disable or provide a specific expression to enable or disable that permission for that collection for that security group. So that's sales managers. Let's see if there's anything else that might be interesting. Salespeople. So you can see here's some custom expressions. So accounts, here's the one that I was trying to do the example of. Accounts, you can update accounts that were created by the currently logged in user. Contacts, same thing. Opportunities is the same thing. And this allows a more granular level of customization for those permissions. So that's pretty cool. And then marketing. Notice marketing has a very different set of collections that they have permissions to. They don't have access to things like activities and industries, and obviously not incidents because that's an IT function. But they do have pretty much free reign of all of the things that it makes sense for them to control. So they don't necessarily have access to create and manage opportunities, but they can see opportunities that salespeople have created. Products, same thing. Maybe that's input by a product management team. But then they do have access to create competitors, campaigns, things that marketing is typically responsible for. So that's basically it. That's not what I want. That's basically security groups in a nutshell. Of course, you can also add a new security group, and this interface is pretty simple and straightforward. There's no downside to adding a new security group, because if you click Add New, you just get the list of collections, the list of permissions, and the list of system rights. So obviously, by default, everything starts out with the default right, which is deny across the board. But you can always customize that. You can add a default set of permissions for any collections that aren't specified here. You can individually enable and disable permissions for individual collections. Very flexible UI, very easy to understand just visually. And that's really kind of at the core of this, because security is super important to get right. And the more complexity you add to a security mechanism, the more likelihood that you're going to mess something up and something is going to be exposed that shouldn't be. And we really don't want that. We want you to be able to see your security quickly at a glance and be able to change something and make sure that everything is exactly what you want it to be. You shouldn't need to have an advanced degree just to figure out if your security is right or not. Definitely test, but you should also be able to see quickly that it's correct, that it's what you want it to be. So hopefully that was helpful. That's security groups in Slingshot. And if you have any questions about how to do security groups, how to manage users in Slingshot, definitely leave a comment below, post your question, and we'll get back to you. You can also send us an email at this email address here, both for more information on Slingshot, questions about how Slingshot works and how it can work for your organization, or if you want to pull the trigger and get it set up and start playing around with it. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you're doing and see how we can help you achieve your organizational goals. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, go ahead and click that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel for more information like this, and leave a comment below if you have any questions at all or suggestions for future topics. And be sure to share this with other people in your organization or other people you think might enjoy this information and might be interested in checking Slingshot out. And of course, I hope you have a great day, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.